Everyone for coming. I am joined today by Mike Massimino, and I am really excited because astronauts are my favorite people to talk to.
That's good.
Yeah, so
Like
I
that.
hope this goes well.
I hope so, too.
You know, starting out, seeing as this is a tech conference, wanted to mention you were the first person to send a tweet from space.
That's right. That's I was the first guy to tweet. It was in May of 2009.
And what message did you have for us?
Yeah, so you know, I didn't get a ghostwriter or anything, and I waited until I got to orbit to be inspired to write this thing. And so what I wrote was, launch was awesome. I'm feeling fine, because I wanted the people of Earth to know I was okay. So I said, I'm feeling fine, enjoying the spectacular views, the adventure of a lifetime has begun. So that was my first tweet. The best thing about that tweet, though, Alyssa, was that I finally had my kids pay attention to me when I was in space. They were both teenagers at the time, 13 and 16. And so, you know, most teenagers, if their parents are going to space, they're really excited about that just to get them out of the house for a while. So I couldn't annoy them. So they were very excited about me going to space, so I wouldn't be able to annoy them. And as a result, I didn't get any email from them. You can email in space, and I wasn't getting any. For a whole week, they just ignored me that I was in space. They were just like, no, we're not going to pay attention to Dad. But on that Saturday, after we launched and I sent that tweet, they made fun of it on Saturday Night Live. Seth Meyers said, you know, we have the first tweet from space. Mike Massimino says, launch was awesome. And he said, in 40 years, we've gone from one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, to launch was awesome. Right? That's where he left it. And he said, if we ever find life on other planets, this is how we're going to hear about it from this guy. And they show like my little Twitter face, you know, and it types out, geez, dudes, look, aliens. You know, that would be it. So my kids who were ignoring me for a week write to me on that Monday afternoon. They get home from school and they write me some email. He goes, Dad, everyone at school thought it was great that they made fun of you on Saturday Night Live. Keep saying stupid stuff. So that was the best part about it. But it was exciting. It was a way to share the journey, and I think it's helped a lot. I think there's been a huge, and from what I can tell, a huge interest in space exploration, and particularly in the last few years, it's grown. I think some of it is these private companies that are doing amazing things. I think it also is the accessibility to what's happening through social media, being able. Just about every astronaut now tweets from space. All of us do. Then when they're in space, what they're going through their training, they Instagram, they do all those things, and I think it helps share that journey. So it's like when I was a little kid, you know, the astronauts were like these superheroes. You didn't know what they were, you know, they were up there, and you know, these people you would want to be like, but couldn't figure out how to do that. But now I think we're much more accessible, and the whole space program is shared because of social media. I think it's a great thing.
Now, you are also one of the rare few who, dare I mention this, gained weight in space.
I did. I gained, and that was, I think we have these photos here that, can we get the photos up? We have a photo of me eating in space, I think, here.
Mike with a biscotti.
Yeah. They hear us in the back? We got any photos coming?
In the meantime,
Okay,
though,
in the meantime,
tell us about your favorite dish in space.
So yeah, so what happened? So it was most people lose weight in space,
you would
right?
think.
Yeah, because you're kind of busy, and you know you may not have as much. Your body goes through a lot of changes, and I didn't have you kind of lose your appetite a little bit. But what happened with me was I was like that for the first couple of days, and then after the spacewalk started going, you know. And I started feeling more relaxed about being in space. My appetite kicked in, so I started like chowing down. And the space food's pretty good. You know, has anyone had the space ice cream? Has anyone tried that stuff? Do you like that stuff? That stuff's disgusting. The reason you can buy that in the museums. Okay, that's me spacewalking. I think. Let's see. All right, let's go back a couple here. That's me eating. Okay, so that's me eating in space. So the reason you can get that ice cream in the visitor center is because astronauts will refuse to eat that stuff. So there's so much of it left over that they sell it to people. We have that available to us, but none of us select that. We have much better desserts. We have chocolate fudge cake, and you can have M&Ms and cookies and really good stuff. And it's so easy to cook this stuff. You know, the macaroni and cheese, you just add some water, and it's all ready to go. Shrimp cocktail.
Shrimp cocktail.
You have shrimp cocktail, so that's very popular. So the food was really good, and what happened was I got back from my first flight, and you go through a physical. You know, they check, see how you're doing, check your heart out, and your balance is okay and all that. And then, of course, that part of a regular physical is they weigh you. And they were astonished that I gained weight. It was like, oh my God, they were so excited. The doctors, and they was like, oh my God, he gained weight. You know, I'm only the second guy that I know of that happened to. So.
And did you ever get sick in space, though? I imagine it's kind of a feast for the senses.
Yeah, just like that food that you saw, and we lost the photo here, but just like that food that comes down, it also sometimes goes in the other direction, unfortunately. And yeah, so your body goes through a lot of changes trying to figure out what's happening. And one of the things that happens is that because you're weightless and you're floating there, your vestibular system is also floating. That's what gives us our sense of up and down, and when we're moving in motion, it all works on gravity. So when you don't have gravity, your vestibular system is floating and saying you are perfectly still. So sometimes, like if you're in a bouncy ride, or in a car, or if you get motion sick at some point, it's a conflict between your senses, right? So for me, it happens sometimes, and I now live in New York City, and if I'm in a bumpy car ride going through Manhattan, and I'm trying to read my phone or read something, my eyes are telling me that I'm stable reading, but my vestibular system is getting a good workout saying I'm moving, and that conflict sometimes can lead to a little motion sickness, right? So, and the same can happen on a boat, or things where you're moving around unusually sometimes can lead to a conflict. So in space, it happens the same reaction for the opposite reason. As you're moving around, your eyes are saying you're moving around the spacecraft, but your vestibular system is saying you're perfectly still. It's not getting any inputs. And so that leads to that conflict, which also can lead to nausea. So I barfed my first day in space. You have really good barf bags, which is good. These are high-tech vomit bags, so work really well. And you always want to have two, because once you do that once, you don't want to open it up and do it again. Yeah. So you seal that thing, that's never going to be opened again, and you get another one ready. So, but it's all due to some of the changes that the body is going to. After the first day, though, you generally feel much better, and I did. And the next morning I felt fine. My second flight, I had absolutely no symptoms. So, your brain adapts, which is an amazing thing. Is how your brain can interpret what's happening and adapt to that situation. And it may take it a little bit of time, but eventually it adapts, and you're fine.
And you are not only an astronaut in real life, but you also played one on TV. You were on The Big Bang Theory.
I was.
And I believe we have that.
We have a shot of that too, I think, coming up here. We have a slide of that, if they can show that. There we go. There I am on the right. So we have any Big Bang Theory fans out there?
Yeah? All right.
All right. Not as many as I thought. I thought there would be. No, so yeah, I got a chance to not only fly in space, but also to portray one on television, be one on TV. But yeah, that was a fun thing to do. That's me on the right, and Pasha Lynchikov, my buddy in the middle, is an actor who played the Russian cosmonaut, and then on the left is Simon Helberg, who plays Wolowitz on the show. But again, it was just another way to share the experience of space travel, and it was just a really fun experience.
And you're actually afraid of heights. I was surprised to learn that. So how the heck do you spacewalk?
Yeah, so I have a fear of height. Like even I like staying this far away from the edge of the stage. I do not like heights. And what I realized this when I was at a very young age. I dreamt about being an astronaut because I saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and I was 6 years old when that happened. And anyone who was alive at that time knows where they were, and it was a big event. But for me, it was something a little more special. I just thought this was the greatest thing ever. And I wanted to be like my heroes who were walking on the moon. But then I realized by the time I was about 8 or 9, a few years later, that I wasn't one of those guys. I was pretty much a scrawny, scared kid who couldn't see very well and was scared of heights. So I kind of wrote off the astronaut thing as not being a possibility. And I still don't like heights. But I wanted to be an astronaut. So when I graduated college and I wanted to get more involved with the space program, I wanted to try to be an astronaut, even though it sounded like a crazy idea and I wasn't sure how suited I was for it. My things like being afraid of heights, I had to deal with it. I don't know if you ever really overcome things like that, but you learn how to deal with it. And it doesn't really affect me in space or even in an airplane, because when you look out the side of an airplane, you don't feel like you're going to fall out of it. I don't like the idea of looking over the side of a building. That's not for me. I don't like that. But in space, because you're so far away from the planet, your perspective is so different. I never really felt like I was going to fall and hit the planet, or I was in any danger. But it did get me on my first spacewalk. I was on the robot arm, going up high on the telescope, and the payload bay was about 60 feet below. So now I had a reference that my brain recognized. You know, now I'm looking over the edge of something, and the robot arm kind of moves, just shakes around a little bit, you know. So I'm like getting shook around, and I'm looking down, and I felt like I could fall. And even though I knew I was weightless and I was in space, and it was obvious I was in space when I was wearing a spacesuit, I knew that in my brain I was like, no, you can't really, but that primal fear took over.
Yeah.
So I felt the need to hold on to something. I didn't want to say, hey, you know, I didn't want to tell my crewmates I was, you know, scared. So what I did is I grabbed my power tool, and I held it, and I felt like I was holding on to something, and then the fear went away. So you learn how to, it sounds ridiculous, but other astronauts have had the same experience. If they're high with a reference to something below them, like the shuttle payload bay, you know, the reaction is you want to hold on. And even though you know that there's no danger there, you're not gonna drop, you still have this need to hold on to something. And for whatever reason, that helps you relax, like you're holding on. And it's little things like that. There's a lot of fear that might have learned, and you just have to figure out a way to get around it so you can do your job.
And that EVA suit that you put on before you go outside into space to do whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah, I think we got a shot of that too.
I believe we do.
If you get the next slide up.
You were telling me that water, if something goes wrong, can actually come into the suit.
Yeah, the spacesuit it's older technology. There, let's see if we can get it up there. I see it in front of us here. If we can put that next slide up on the screen. Shot of the suit. But the spacesuit is really a miraculous device. It was, and there it is. That's me looking during my first spacewalk, trying to look like I'm calm, and you can see the Earth in my visor there. But the most expensive part of the spacesuit is the life support system that you wear on your back, and that was designed for the very first shuttle flights back in the early 1980s, designed back in the 1970s, and we still use these same life support systems. We had. After the Columbia accident, we lost a couple on that shuttle flight. We had 12 remaining, and we have about 10 that can still be used. And they're miraculous. They're very expensive, very intricate, small miniaturization parts. And part of it is a pump that can pump water to a cooling garment you're wearing. It also pumps air to over your head, a vent duct that comes in over your head, to provide fresh air so you can breathe that. It also separates water from the air and air from the water, because sometimes you can get air inside your water system, and some water as you breathe out, you're going to get some water into the air, and it gets filtered and carbon dioxide comes out. But this one pump kind of handles that. It's the only thing you hear. It's a pump fan separator assembly, and that's the only thing you hear when you're spacewalking. It's very quiet. Whatever comes in over your headset, of course, you'll hear that. Your voice sounds a lot different because you're at a lower pressure, 4.3 psi. Sound travels. There's not as many molecules in front of your face. You can't whistle while you're working when you're in space. So your voice sounds much deeper. You can hear what's coming in over your headset, and you hear that fan noise humming in the background, and that's it. You can bang on stuff, you won't hear it. It's like really quiet and somewhat peaceful. And you want to hear that fan noise because you know the suit is working. But we had a malfunction of that, and after all these years, or just a couple years ago, of this thing working perfectly, we had a mixing of the air and the water. That separator wasn't working quite like it should during a spacewalk. And my friend Luca Parmitano, who's an Italian astronaut, when the air was being delivered over his head, it also delivered water over his head, and it started to pool, and a lot of water was started to accumulate right around his face, and he did have the possibility of drowning. It's probably the closest we've come to killing someone during a spacewalk, but luckily they aborted the spacewalk, and he was able to come in safely.
And you have spent so many nights in space. How do you get a good night's sleep? I hear you can do it on the ceiling.
We have a picture of that, if they can get that, advance the slide. There I am. You'll hopefully see this in a second here. So you can, one of the cool things you have, there we go. So one of the cool things about sleeping in space on the shuttle, you could sleep anywhere you wanted pretty much. You know, I slept on the ceiling a couple nights. There I am, I'm on the left, sleeping on the wall. And I got a sleep mask on, and I've got a strap around my head, which I think is kind of interesting. When they teach you how to do everything in space, and one of the things is they teach you how to set up your bedroll and what you need to get a good night's rest. And that strap around my head is actually keeping my head against the pillow. one of the things that we've learned to do is sleep with something behind our head, because we sleep usually with a pillow or something, our head against something. And when you're floating in space, I've actually sometimes just kind of dozed off taking a nap, just kind of floating there. But we're used to having something behind our heads. And so to try to get a good night's sleep, it works better if we have a pillow behind our head. But when you're in space, your head will float off of that pillow. So by putting this strap, it kind of keeps the pillow on your head. And as you have that thing, you feel that behind your head and you feel more comfortable that way. So that's, even though you're kind of floating there, we still like to have a pillow. And the only way you're going to get it to work is to strap it to your head. So that's what I've done there. There's some background noise, so you wear earplugs as well. And what we're doing is kind of like, you can see there's my buddy Mike Good, and then I think Megan MacArthur was on the right of that photo. That's her hand there. So he's kind of like a slumber party. That's the way it was on the space shuttle. You set up your sleeping bag wherever you want to go to bed. It's like a big slumber party. With the space station, because they're up there for so long, my friends are up there, Peggy Whitson, for example, and Jack Fisher are up there now, 2 Americans along with a couple cosmonauts and a French astronaut. They each have their own little bedroom. It's kind of like a closet where they have their sleeping bag permanently set up, and they can have pictures of their family and a computer. And it's like a closet. It looks like a closet, but it's an actual little crew quarters for them to sleep in. But it's very relaxing. Once you get used to it, first couple nights, I felt a little funny. Again, your body going through changes. Your spine elongates. And I felt that at night you actually grow in the spine about 1.5 inches. You lose that when you come back to Earth. It does hurt. It's uncomfortable. And you're like, what's going on? And you know what it is. And you're like, oh, yeah, right, they told me about this. And it's a little lower back pain. But after the first couple of nights, you get used to this, and the pain goes away, your spine stabilizes, and the nausea and all that is gone, and it's just great. You just float there. It's like the greatest waterbed you've ever been in. You're just very relaxing. Even though you're inside the sleeping bag, you're kind of floating within it, and it's the best way to sleep.
And I believe we have a photo of you as a kid.
Yeah.
So if we could pull up the photo of little Mass.
Right.
I wanted to ask, how did that kid get to where he is right now? I mean, the program is so competitive.
It is, and that's me dressed up like my hero Neil Armstrong about 2 days after the moon landing. So what happened there is I wanted to dress up and play astronaut in the backyard. So my mom converted my elephant costume. That's actually a gray elephant costume from the first grade play. I was an elephant, and my mom cut off the tail and made it into an astronaut costume. And I had no one to play with in my neighborhood, apparently, growing up. So I had my Snoopy was my co-pilot, so I would have astronaut adventures with Snoopy in the backyard. But that's what I dreamt about doing when I was, as a little guy. And when you're little, everything's possible. But by the time, as I said earlier, by the time I got to be 8 or 9, I realized that the idea of me becoming an astronaut was just preposterous. It was impossible. It's like trying to become a superhero. I wasn't the type to do that. But when I got out of college, it wasn't until I was an adult, I got out of college and I was working, I dreamt about trying to become an astronaut again. I realized that whether or not I wanted to deny it, my passion, like I know this is a room full of passionate people that have different passions. My passion was the space program, and I had to do something about it. So I went to grad school and I started applying. I got rejected 3 times. One of the times I was medically disqualified, so I had to get that reversed before I could even apply again. And on my 4th try, I got picked. And I'm going to show, if you can show the next slide of me with, that's me with my Snoopy, you'll see coming out. That's me with Snoopy in space. That's my same Snoopy. But I realized that becoming an astronaut, when I was in grad school, I remember seeing I was watching television, it was the news, and the astronauts were floating around. And I said to myself, that's exactly what I want to do. And then there was a voice in the back of my head that said, but you will never get a chance to do that. That'll never happen. And that was the reality of it, is that I thought it was impossible, but it really wasn't. It was just unlikely. There's a difference between something being impossible and something being unlikely. The probability of me becoming an astronaut was probably 0.0000, a lot of zeros and a 1 at the end. And the only way something truly becomes impossible is if you give up. Once you give up, that 1 at the end of those zeros, for all of you that are developing these wonderful things, these dreams, these passions you're following, maybe it's unlikely. Maybe it's probably better chances than me becoming an astronaut. But there's always that 1 out there somewhere. And the only way that 1 becomes a 0 is if you give up. As long as you don't give up, there's always a chance. And that's what I kept in mind, and it finally worked out.
Great. Well, that is unfortunately all the time we have. I could go on for hours and hours, but Mike will be signing books after this, so you can ask him whatever you want, like what space smells like, maybe.
Yeah, I can answer that one.
But thank you so much for coming.
Thanks. Thank you for coming.